I'm going to.
Oh, that's right. You filmed it last time too, didn't you?
You couldn't hear last time.
Gotcha.
We're right now going through the offices of Promise686, and we just want you to see where they meet, where they work. The last time we were here, the board was having prayer in this room. And then all around the offices, they have posters and stories that you can do on the scan. Very impressive, saying over 400,000 children in the U.S. foster care system now. Wow. Nearly 1 in 5 children who enter, wow, annually are less than 12 months old. And there you can see the baby. Promise686 name comes from Psalm 68:6. God sets the lonely in families. The average age of a child in the U.S. foster care system is 7 years old. This little boy's story is quite astounding. He said, "My siblings and I were all separated. I begged to be with my brothers, but they put us in different cop cars and drove us to our new homes. I remember crying myself to sleep that night. It was the start of a lot of sadness, confusion, and anger." Children who served and removed from their house, home, families, and communities often experience grief, anxiety, and anger, especially if they've been separated from their siblings. Every year, more than 23,000 youth age out of foster care when they turn 18. These young adults often lack the support and connections needed to thrive into adulthood, and many are forced to navigate life completely alone. When youth age out of foster care, they are more likely to experience homelessness, joblessness, incarceration, unplanned pregnancy, and human trafficking. But it doesn't have to be this way. When vulnerable families and foster families are supported, children thrive. Promise686 equips churches across the nation to provide what vulnerable children need most: safe, loving families. This young woman's story says, "When I turned 18, I got my apartment. Even with my own space, I still felt something was missing. I was lonely. I wasn't in contact with my family, and I didn't have any friends I could call. I realized then I was not prepared to be on my own." Promise686 feels like they have a solution, and that is to equip churches. And they know that equipped churches are engaging their people to serve vulnerable children. Love, support, mentoring, connection. We're now going to go down the hall where all the partners are gathering for coffee, and we will go into a larger room where the founder, Andy Cook, will give a presentation about how the ministry works. So be patient with us as we walk down the hall of this wonderful facility where their offices are located. The whole facility was built out with a gentleman who was thinking about nonprofits, and particularly Christian nonprofits. So you'll enjoy getting to see it as I walk.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. I think everyone is in here, so we're just gonna get started because we're a little bit behind time. I just wanted to throw this up there, and this was on the wall. But again, the reason that we do what we do is because there are over 400,000 children in the U.S. foster care system, and we believe that's fixable because of the church or by the church. And we actually, what's the saying that we say? It is the church's responsibility to take care of the most vulnerable. So, again, our mission is to mobilize the church communities to care for vulnerable children. And we just wanted to take a moment to talk about our board. Our board is incredibly supportive and engaged in the work that we do. I think they have a board meeting next Friday, the first of the year, and they have pushed us with really big goals over the past couple of years, but they knew and believed that we could succeed in them, and so we're just really, really grateful for their support throughout the year. And now I will turn it over to Andy Cook.
So we are looking for a female board member.
Or
two.
I said Jody must have a great time. Is Jody the female on
Jody
the board?
Jody handles everyone just fine. Jody doesn't need another female in the room, but I think Promise could benefit from a different perspective there. Yeah, we've had an amazing board. Years ago, I was up in Chicago meeting with our advisory board, so not that group, and somebody said, tell me about your board. And I said, it's amazing. We've had some of the same folks for a really, really long time. And, they actually said, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I thought, oh, gosh. And so one of the things that we've actually started to do and be more intentional about in recent years is just to have a sense of term limits, to keep bringing in people who are not just committed, they are extremely committed, but are excited and ready and want to network us amongst their friends. All right, so the most boring thing I could do for you right now would be to walk you through our chronology as an organization. I do want to give you a sense of our history, but I think the best way to give you that perspective on our history actually is not to tell you about 2007 and 2008 when we started, and 2009 when we finally became a nonprofit, and year by year by year, but instead to do it from the perspective of my own family. I think that's not just more compelling, I think it gives you a better perspective of what Promise is actually doing for families through churches. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the Cook family and how Promise has evolved along the way. Remember the old hair commercial where the guy was bald and the H and what was that HR? What was the one where he's like, I'm not just the owner, I'm the client or whatever. What does he say? What does he say? Something like that. You know what I'm talking about. It's that old commercial. Well, I am a huge beneficiary of the services that Promise has offered through my local church. And our family, the Cook family, would not have survived what God called us to without people coming and pouring their lives out on our behalf. And that's the truth of the U.S. child welfare system. The people who step up to care for kids take a huge hit. It's not just a financial hit, it's an emotional hit. And we needed our church to love us well, and our church needed a plan for how to do that. And that's what Promise does. We provide a plan, a menu of resources and guidance so that churches can care for vulnerable children really, really well. Our family story goes back. Martha is, I have to point out which one's my wife, because she's so young, is to my, how does that work? To my left, right? In that green dress. The green dress doesn't help in this picture either. So in 2007, when Promise was first starting, Martha and I felt a call to adopt from Ethiopia. And we were part of Perimeter Church, which is a large church just up the road. And someone got on stage, Jeffrey and Jenny Pinkerton, and they shared about a Haitian adoption process. It was just testimony. It was how God had moved in their hearts and their lives and opened doors for them to bring home 2 children from Haiti. And that rocked Martha and me. Note that our church was the context for us to experience the calling of God to care for vulnerable kids. That's key. Because what if churches could do that on a recurring basis throughout Atlanta, throughout Georgia, and across the country? So in the context of our church, we sent an email. We heard from the Pinkertons, who stood up in front of us talking about Haiti, that they actually now had an adoption grant that was available to people at Perimeter Church. And so I emailed Jeffrey Pinkerton. I said, Jeffrey, I would love to find out how to apply for that grant. He replies, you just did. You got $3,000. Well, that initial grant money that the Cooks, as well as a few other families, received from Perimeter Church became ultimately the grant funding that was the first program of Promise686. So when Martha and I went to Ethiopia to adopt Andrew and Sydney, we traveled over there knowing that we had money from our church, knowing that our church was behind us and would be with us when we got back. That's a big deal. So Promise essentially started as a very simple charity. We did one thing. We identified that money was a barrier to children entering foster care. And so, my brain just left. Money was a barrier for children making it into families. And so we wanted to make sure that no one could say, oh, I don't have enough money to adopt. So we went after that. And here we are, 14 years later, having given away over $4 million to families for grants. And that's a program that we will continue to invest in every year because we feel like some people just need a little money to ultimately bring a child home. Well, that wasn't it for the Cooks, as you can see. There was some more adoption that came a little bit later. But before I get there, in 2008, we actually named Promise686. And if you haven't caught on, it's from Psalm 68:6. Our vision is that verse. God sets the lonely in families. And that is our vision. And we wanted to make sure that as we worked to make sure that kids would be in families, that we never lost that vision. We never lost our roots in Scripture. And we made it part of our name. So it's a good way to lock yourself into the authority of God's Word, is to put it in your name. It's hard to skip that. As we launched as a ministry, we did just that one thing. We offered grants. But it's funny, you start giving people money and you realize that money isn't the main issue. It never really is. And what they actually needed more was money plus information. People didn't know how to adopt. They had no idea. And so we started giving Adoption 101 classes. And this was all happening around one church, but our grants were open to the broader community of Georgia. And as we gave people information, we realized that that actually wasn't the reason they weren't adopting. The reason they weren't adopting was because they were scared. And people ultimately needed people. So we said, well, what if we sent a support team with the family the moment they adopted, that they would know they could count on 6 to 8 members of their church to be with them. Well, we started doing that, and more families adopted at Perimeter Church. Now at that point, I was working actually just kind of across the way here at Wesleyan School. That was in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. I was a board member of Promise, and I was not the CEO. In fact, Promise only had one staff member. It was somebody who made sure that the dollars and cents added up for grants. But around 2013, we saw an opportunity, and it happened like this. Somebody on our team said, hey, what are you doing about children in our own backyard who are in foster care? You guys talk about adoption, but what about the kids domestically? Much of your efforts in adoption are centered even internationally, but what about kids here who desperately need a short-term family or a long-term forever family? What are you doing about that? And we said, well, nothing. And we knew that agencies existed. Promise686 is not a foster care placement agency. Those guys are doing great work, and we refer families from churches who get recruited to foster through our through our programs. We refer to those guys all the time. We need them. They are amazing. They're under contract with the state of Georgia. We are not. We are not under any contract with Georgia or any other state. But as we kind of looked at this question of foster care, we realized that we got to step up. We've turned a blind eye to the children who are in our kids' classrooms. We have to do something about this. So in 2013, we said, well, what would we do? And we went to Gwinnett County DFACS. We sat down with the county director and we said, what would help you? She told us a few things. And we came back a month later. We said, well, we did some of those things. What would help you? We did some of the things she asked. We came back a month later. The third month we came back, she said, churches never come back 3 times. I said, well, we're not just a church, we're a ministry. Yeah, she didn't listen. Churches never come back 3 times. You guys are famous for getting excited for a minute, and then we never see or hear from you again. Well, we really struggled with that idea. She said, so what is your need? She said, we need 100 new foster families in Gwinnett County. I said, all right, we got you. So we went back and we started talking, and this was right before I came on staff at Promise, and we said, well, how would we do that? And the answer became, let's take some of the culture that we've seen start at this church, Perimeter Church. Let's take the beginning of a ministry and let's actually create a structure where we can see this happen in lots of churches all around Atlanta and all around Georgia. So immediately we did a meeting. It was over at Victory World Church, which is about 5 miles that way. And we got 10 churches to step up. And little should I have been surprised that 3 years later, which is the time frame, we had raised up 112 foster families across Gwinnett County. And God moved in such exceptional ways. And in that time, we went from really being a ministry of one church to a ministry of a growing number of churches. In fact, our growth rate has hovered about 50% every year since, in terms of getting to more churches and more churches. We started to have a problem. We were giving churches all these different resources that we thought would engage them in God's word, their calling, to know why they would engage in foster care, and it got confusing to churches. And somewhere around 2015, 2016, we said, you know what, we've got to make this simple. And so we came up with this simple idea of FAM. What we do at Promise is we plant family advocacy ministries in churches, FAMs. And a FAM strategically does 3 things. It can prevent children from coming into foster care, it can intervene when they do come into care, or it can connect children to families forever. Prevent, intervene, or connect. Also around 2015, as we started talking more and more about this ministry package and seeing the churches step up more and more people mobilize to serve vulnerable kids, I went to a men's retreat. And my wife sent me a text. And the text said, hey, do you want to adopt 5 kids?
She should have said, are you sitting down?
Well, I was smart enough to not say no, because I knew that would not end well. So I said, let me pray about it, obviously. I was at a men's retreat, and that was just the obvious message in return. She held me to that, and some weeks later, I remember lifting up the comforter of our bed. This is Martha and I are sitting in bed, 10:30 at night. We've got 5 kids. There's another bio kid in the mix, born in there, Michael. So we've got 5 kids running around. And I lifted up the comforter and I crawled to the base of the bed. And I said, Martha, this is how I feel. This is your visual. I just want to run from this. This is too much. This is too scary. And secondly, I said, I'm willing to do this, but I have to want to do this because I can't bring home children and not want them. So Lord, you're gonna have to birth in me a desire to do this, which you called me to. And he did. He really did. The situation of our children, the next 5 kids who joined the Cook family, is that they lived just up the road. We didn't travel to Ethiopia. We just traveled to Roswell, Georgia. And already 3 churches were plugged into their lives. They were doing an amazing job of trying to love this family. And 3 families had emerged when the father had come and committed crimes and abusive, alcoholic, and threatened the family. And he ended up being deported. And mom, soon after that, found out that she had cancer.
Oh.
And when she succumbed to cancer, these churches, and this is, step aside from that horrific pain for a second, this is sort of amazing. These 3 churches were so deep in their story that they became like an adoption agency. So rather than my 5 children passing into the custody of the state, instead, church became the front line response to see, well, maybe some families would step up. 3 families stepped up, but that wasn't the plan. The plan wasn't to do 2 kids, and 1 kid. They wanted to find one family who would say yes to all 5. Here are the cooks. Wow. So we brought the Cruz Cook kids into our family in 2015, and the adoption process took a minute, and about 2017 closed on that adoption. In those 2 years, we had days where we had so many members of our church community parked outside of our house that we got like different types of violations from the city of Peachtree Corners. And there's all sorts of concerns about like what we had constructed inside our house that might not be up to code. And anyway, we had wonderful neighbors, but a few were like, this is unacceptable. One day, actually, after all of the people who joined our team to make it so our family could survive, one day, the city of Peachtree Corners code inspector showed up, and he said, we've been made aware that you guys are running an unlawful in-house business.
No.
And my wife's pretty quick, and she figured it out before the guy could spit it out, but she said, well, what's that? Looks like it's some sort of childcare business that you're running here. And she was like, oh yeah. That guy left so embarrassed. And I thought we felt bad for him, but I don't now, because when he got to the end of the driveway, he actually was like, actually, I need to go to measure to see if your shed is far enough off your property line. Oh. And we built this huge 16 by 12 shed, which was the right size and the appropriate number of feet off the property line, because we had no place to put all of our stuff. I mean, we lived just in a suburban house up here, and all of a sudden we had 10 kids. Y'all, that team, that care community is what Promise calls it. They stuck with us literally until December of this past year. And the needs changed. We didn't need childcare all the time. My kids now, 7 of 10 are 18 and older. What we needed actually was just meal support. And so often people will step into the lives of foster families and adopted families for that first month or 3 months. And one of the things we identified at Promise is we have to engineer teams and volunteers in such a way that they will come and they will stay, because most of the issues don't really surface until after 3 months and 6 months and 18 months. And a lot of times we'll be putting teams around families through Promise 5 and 10 years later, because issues of trauma that occurred early on are blowing up down the road. And so the need doesn't quite just disappear. Anyway, so that's how Promise evolved. We actually kind of did things backwards. We started in the connection space, connecting children to families through adoption. And then we got into the intervention family, raising up foster families, making sure there's a lot of support for those families, doing that all through building out church ministries. And then around 2017, 2018, we realized that we weren't doing enough to prevent families from falling apart. So we found an amazing tech solution that we actually implement almost across Georgia now. Fulton, DeKalb, all the metro counties we're covering with. And it's the solution where a social worker can enter a need. We'll train this Georgia social workers to enter a need into the system. And on the other side of the need is people in churches that we've lifted up, we've trained and taught to meet the need that's going to pop up through this tech platform. And it has been absolutely amazing to see people step up and meet small material needs. So that's a little bit about the Cooks. That's kind of how we came to be. And here we are in 2024 now. But where Promise has grown in that time is that we get to serve just over 16,000 children a year. This would be across 38 states. Again, the bulk of our work is in Georgia. The emphasis of our grant conversation with you is actually focused in and around Metro Atlanta. But we serve 18,000 volunteers. And just one way to look at us is to say, we just decided we wanted to crowdsource the problem. If we could get enough people from enough churches plugged into this work, we felt like children could get the families they need, and we're seeing that come to life. All right, so that's some on our history. So let's get into the grant here for a minute. We came to you guys as 100 Shares and said, hey, there's two things that would be a huge difference maker for us and would really impact kids. One of them is we have a legacy software system that we have a team that maintains and does their thing on day in and day out. And it's used across the country. There's actually 60,000 people using this software system that was designed via bootstrap efforts about 7 years ago and bit by bit improved. It's not getting it done anymore. That legacy system can't support what we want to accomplish for children and for families. And I want to walk you through what that is, but we asked you guys to consider giving $50,000 to help take us from the 1.0 version of the software into a true 2.0, which includes an app. So that's one piece of the puzzle. The second thing that we came to you guys with was we have a big need for not adoption grants, like we started with and still offer, but post-placement support grants. There are needs that families have in foster care as well as in adoption that the state doesn't cover. And we find that when we can get money into the hands of a team leader who's running that team of volunteers, and that team leader can help that foster mom or that adoptive mom to make decisions about how to use the money, that goes a long way to alleviate stress and build margin for parents to care for kids. They can be for medical needs, but it can also be just, man, we don't have a bed and there's no other way to pay for a bed. So lots of different ways, and we want to take $50,000 in grants, probably in chunks of $1,000, so it would be 50 grants, and we want to use the money to not only help families care for kids better, but we want to do it to do a better job of going deep in Metro Atlanta. And this is something I didn't focus on last time when we did the last site visit, but we want to engage 10% of the churches in every county where Promise serves. And we love serving 24 churches in Fulton County, that's great. But we need to be serving about 100 churches in Fulton County to really make a dent in the problem. And we want to use actually some of this money through getting foster families plugged in to kind of reverse engineer that. We can then turn to the church and say, hey, there's a family over here that's waiting to utilize this grant, that's waiting for a team. And we need you, church, to send that team. So we have kind of dual purpose. We want to help that family have the margin to care for a kid. We'll do that, but we also want to use it to mobilize our churches a bit better in support of the families and launch new churches in and around Metro Atlanta. All right, so I'm going to dig into those things a little bit more. First, you need to understand that we, to do the work with the app, are in the process of working with a guy, David Asbury, as a consultant, as a contractor. And this is his work to come in from the outside. He will not join our team. We don't want to have a full-time app contractor on our team into the future. We can't afford him. But we do need money to get this thing into the level of quality that we think it needs to be to accelerate our work within churches. So please understand this will be through a contractor, and we are not hiring these people. They will not remain on staff. These are some of the app designs. Why do we need an app? That sounds great. You know, these days everybody needs an app for everything. Well, one, please understand that the app, or the software, not the app, the software is already in use. So we aren't building for the hope that the cool tech is going to change everything. We have people who are saying our system is sluggish. It's not getting it done. So that's one reason we've got to fix what we have. Secondly, we want to offer features in an app format that we can't offer right now. The homepage, and I've kind of clicked into Northland's church, a church down the road, identifies pretty quickly some of the families that are supported within that church. We need to give quick access to our volunteers to see the right family where they are actually supporting and know who they're interacting with. Once you select a family, then you start to see activities in regards to the Espinosas. And has their meal been met? Has the babysitting actually occurred that the church member said they would do? Has the bed been delivered that somebody in the church said they would deliver? Actually creating a place where that can all happen is hugely important to us. And we haven't had that. The legacy system will map out all the volunteers and will make sure that we're mapping the closest volunteer to the family. And that will continue to happen here. But what hasn't happened is we haven't put people together to communicate around the needs of the family. Time out. It would be really easy for Promise to be focused on meeting material needs. We're not. I almost don't want to meet material needs unless there is a relational opportunity. People are transformed through relationships. And our legacy app doesn't give the opportunity for people to connect. It doesn't give the opportunity for the family to be someone who's in the system conveying their needs. It's actually happening all outside of them. And that's extra problematic because one of the things Promise does now is we put teams around biological families that the state identifies are falling apart, and we put a team around that family. So it's not just foster care, not just adoption, but it's putting teams around biological families so that we prevent a kid from coming into the system. And we want that mom, we want Miss Espinoza to have a voice and for that to be heard along the way. So what happens is that it becomes relational. And when Michael and David Cook go to hang out with the Espinoza's sons, then all of a sudden we can pop a picture of that, and it's a closed group. So it's not social media. It doesn't violate confidentiality rules. We can do that in a closed way. We can also use our need meeting system, it's called Care Portal, integrated into this app. And this is where you have a social worker posting a need. We've trained her to post. It says we have a 15-year-old mother who needs a baby car seat. And that's going to go out as a notification through the app, and anybody who's a responder in any of the churches we're serving across the state, as well as beyond, will have the ability to click through and meet that need and correspond with the social worker directly. So that's what this system will help accomplish. It breaks down pretty easily into calendar, resources, people, families, churches, GeoMap. Those are sort of the sections of the actual app. One of the things that we find is that people don't know what resources are available. And so being able to offer a visual and to be able to, it's not a touchscreen, but be able to click and see what resources that church offers is great, because we're not asking everyone's church to do the same thing. We are actually asking churches to do the most meaningful thing that's needed in their community, and at the same time that fits the DNA of that local church. So churches can have different activities, and they'll pull from hundreds of resources that Promise has in the system to do those activities. And this piece is not built out at all, but we need to be able to monitor and report on the impact of what we're doing. And right now, our legacy system gives us very little ability to monitor and report. We love that we're wide. We love that we serve 1,800 churches across the country. That's super cool. But if we don't know what they're doing, that's not super cool, okay? Okay, I want to kind of give you an example of why a post-placement support grant will make a big difference in someone's life. So I want to invite Heather Branham to come on up. Let's clap for her. Heather is a foster adoptive mom who lives not so far away.
Around the corner.
And she is sweet to come and spend some time with us. And I just wanted to give you a chance first to kind of give some of the story, how it is that you guys decided to foster, and then what that was like. And then we'll kind of talk about what does that mean in light of Promise after that. But let's get started with just how was it you guys started fostering, and what was the experience like?
Okay. Try to summarize that. I think my husband and I came to the decision. decision on very different levels. I sensed the call to adopt or possibly foster very early on in my life. I went on some missions trips with my dad around the world, and just even as a child, that call was on my heart. It didn't really come, it still didn't really come to fruition until much later, but it was there. My husband actually grew up in a very impoverished home, and probably should have been in foster care, to be honest. But so I think for him, he and his I don't know if I said this last time, but his mother is adopted also. So I don't know, there's just little things, but together, I think we started to really explore it when we became a part of Perimeter Church and met people like the Cook family. But there's just a beautiful culture. The FAM model is there, and there's a beautiful culture of adoption and fostering that really started, I think, to kind of get our minds thinking in that way. But we have two biological daughters, Violet and Chloe. And so, just like with anything, you get distracted, we were busy having our girls, raising our girls, but I guess it was just a series of events that the Lord used for us. We did have some infertility, but also just, one of those things where every sermon, every song, every person you meet, I'm a pediatric nurse, so a lot of foster care in the hospital, it was just everywhere, and it was just not going away. And so we took the plunge to start the process probably maybe, I don't even know, 4 years ago. So.
And when you jumped in, what was it like? It was
Yeah.
Rainbows, unicorns?
Oh, rainbows, yes. We honestly intended to probably get one baby. That was our goal. And somehow, that's a long story, but we welcomed 4 children from foster care at once into our home. Whoa. With 9 days notice. And so God he really, I think what was interesting was the actual road to becoming a foster parent was very telling and enlightening as far as like, whoa, this is so broken. There's so much need here. And so we just started to say, okay, Lord, it wasn't like a lightning bolt. He just kept peeling back the layers saying, you can do this, you can do this. And a lot of the reason we felt like we could is because we knew we were in a church community that would support this, and we knew that, and we calculated that. But, so yes, we took the kids in, and it was the hardest thing we've ever done in our lives. Point blank. I love my children so much, so let me just say that before we go. But it was the hardest thing we've ever done our whole life. So there was just, they walk in the door, I'm doing a lot of reflecting these days because we're hitting a little over 2 years, but they are literally terrified, and they were all in 4 different homes and then brought together in a lot of ways triggering each other with past trauma and shared trauma, and we were not prepared for that. But
what ages were they?
When they came to us, they were 2, 4, 6, and 8, and the 8 is actually another home now. But so yeah, and my girls were, I don't even remember, 7 and 10, I think, at the time. So I don't even remember what the question is now. I'm just talking. What was the question?
You're answering it. What was it like? How was that experience?
Yeah, it was so hard. It's kind of like I always equate it to being a parent. You don't know what you're getting yourself into until you're a parent. There's just absolutely, no matter how many things you do, how many books you read, you don't know what's coming, and in a lot of ways that's the way it was. We thought we were prepared, but we had no idea, and just the level of pain walking into our home. And then, to be honest, the level of pain that it brought to our own children, our biological children. So it was just a very, the best way I can describe it is like a blur, really, now. Just living in this bubble of, where you, I don't know, very isolating, and just trying to meet very small, they didn't sleep for a year, just really basic needs, trying to meet basic needs, but also address some of their others. So, and then also, piece is dealing with defects. I work as a nurse part-time, and my husband travels, but I didn't know I was gonna need 20 hours a week to fight for basic needs, to fight for services, to fight to keep them. It was a real learning curve, learning how to deal with them. So it was hard.
It was hard.
It was hard.
So you mentioned that your church is one where Promise serves, and there's a fam. Through that, you received a team, a care community, to come around you guys. Tell us about that experience, how that was helpful.
Yes.
What did that do?
That was life-changing. I've said this quite a few times, but I don't know that we would have honestly adopted the kids if it wasn't for the support we had. And not because we didn't have the heart to, but it was just that hard. And even up until the last few months, like we were really praying, like, okay, because I mean, in some ways it's like we didn't have the heart not to, but then our own girls were suffering. It was just a hard time. But having a care team and the support of our local fam Promise team was life-changing. It started right away, and I was actually shocked at how fast it was mobilized because, like I said, we had, even though we knew we were going to do this, we had 9 days with the actual ages and stages and all the things. So, I mean, within 24 hours, my entire garage was bombed out of stuff. And I mean, people were just showing up. There was an actual, we had just our whole church all together, but then we had a team that fed us 2 meals a week for a year. But our actual Promise team too, oh my goodness, it was just, it's not about the stuff, but sometimes it's just about being seen, because no matter how badly you need help, sometimes you're too in the trenches to know how to ask for it, and sometimes you just are so isolated, and so just sometimes I would open the door and there would be a note with a pack of diapers. Or one day I remember I literally was out of toothpaste for like a week and everyone's yelling at me to get toothpaste. And one day there's just toothpaste and I didn't tell anyone that I needed toothpaste. And it was so crazy. But these, both our care team and just the Promise team, they just showed up big. And, we don't really need it in the same way, but our needs have changed. And like you said, I loved what you said. I know deep down that if we are at a point where we need to reinstate that, or we need to be like, help, they're there, and that's a wonderful feeling. So, yeah.
And the Branhams are also a recipient of a post-placement support grant. And that, if people know a lot about foster care, they might think, well, you adopted through foster care, it was a sibling set, in theory everything's paid for.
Yeah, no. I don't even think it covers the food bill.
So tell us how that grant has been helpful to your family.
Like I said, the needs really change, and that's been something that, again, I'm learning as I go, right? I don't even think we could calculate how much we were spending on food until after our care team stopped feeding us, But I think in a lot of ways, like I said, the first year, I would even say almost 2, was such a blur. You're trying to just meet basic needs. You're trying to help them feel safe. You're trying to mold a family. And so I think in a lot of ways, the pain does not come out yet. And so I will say, we are in an intense time in our family right now, and it feels different. It feels stable. It feels a little safer. But we're in an intense time where the kids are opening up. My youngest is coming to places of understanding. They just have a lot of needs. And most people, like you said, are like, oh, you guys have been at this a while. Everything's great. You're one big happy family, and I'm sure you've got it all figured out. And we're like, yeah, But we just found that, we have tutoring. We have, I'm like blanking, speech therapy. We have counseling for now 5 children, not 3, There's a lot of financial needs that we knew, honestly, going in we wouldn't be able to do, and we just trusted that God would meet them. But just with the needs, and then also just the support for where we are, it's been amazing to do that fundraising. So.
And those grants work is where Promise will give a certain amount of money. It sort of depends on the family's financial situation, and then the family can match that and typically raise a lot more than that. So that initial contribution could be $1,000 from Promise, or sometimes it's $3,000 or $4,000. But that family then is going to make that pile of money $10,000 sometimes, and $15,000 to help them get through meeting the various needs that pop up. Yeah. Well, Heather, I love that you've done this. That your family is on this road, and thanks for sharing it with us. We appreciate it. about 5 more minutes left of our part of the program, and then we'll shift over to some questions in a moment for you guys. But I want to invite Melissa to come forward. Everything that we have done at Promise, all the resources that we developed, and there are hundreds, all the software that is used to kind of keep it all together, all the money we pour into families, all the training we do for defects, it's a lot, y'all. And I know when you learn about Promise, you're like, they don't just do one thing. Well, we do just one thing, actually. We plant ministries in churches so they can do a billion things. And we can't be everywhere that God's church is. That's why we equip his church. And one of our core values is to equip and never supplant the local church. Equip and never supplant the local church. That's all well and good, as long as you have an awesome leader at a church. So most of our churches have groups of 2 or 3 advocates, lay leaders, who are charged with making sure that those resources actually make it into the lives of families and children, and that's been Melissa's job. So I wanted to invite Melissa to come forward and to really just to tell us a little bit about that role, because it's so pivotal for everything we're trying to accomplish. So you probably remember the first question. What's my first question?
Yes. So what's the role of an advocate? What do I do?
Yep.
Absolutely, right?
That's correct.
So it's really just to champion the cause for vulnerable children, right? And so we do that with the partnership with Promise686. And so when I first heard about Promise686, I mean, I was at the church passionate about ministry and outreach. Like, that is my heart. You know, I just want to serve, right? But I went to the church and they didn't have a place to serve, you know, kids that were either at risk to be in foster care or in foster care. Like, we didn't have it. And so, anyway, so this ministry just, it provides the materials and the resources and training and just packages that ministry for your church. And so it was such an easy process to partner, to say, I want to go, but I don't know how. I don't know who. I don't know, where are the families? You know, I didn't know how to do that. So Promise came with all that information. So it was just so easy for me to say yes, you know, to be willing and say, let's do this. You've got everything lined up for me, everything. You tell me exactly what I need to do. And that was amazing to me, because most ministries, you know, they don't provide that, those resources and that tools and the training and like everything you need. So all I needed to do was to say yes and go. And so it was a perfect partnership for me and for my church.
That's great. And, you know, it makes me think that in the software system, even the legacy system, the one that we need to update, when Melissa wants to engage a new volunteer, she's just texting or sending a link, and then the training that needs to unfold, the registration of that person's name, all that's kind of tagged in a way that you can see it. So staying organized as an advocate, leading, especially in a bigger church like Victory, being organized is kind of everything. You're so passionate. You love, like, doing what God's put on your heart. So fundamentally, you love what you do. I get it. But what do you love about being an advocate specifically?
I got to really see the impact, right? So last time I shared a quote, and I wrote it down this time because it is from Edmund Burke, so it's so impactful in my life. It says, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph in the world is that good men do nothing. So again, when I became aware of the situation and the need to serve these children, I had no idea 600,000 kids were, you know, in the welfare system. I had no idea. And so when I became aware of that quote, it just spoke. I can't, you know, I have to get involved. How do I get involved? And so that's where I started. And so I love the impact that I see in the relationships that I make. I told a story last time, and we still have time to share a story. Okay, so I'm going to touch on that, but I want to share 2. So real quickly, because it is so meaningful, it's so powerful. So I told a story of a 3-year-old little girl, and she's autistic. And I had a young family in my church call me and say, Melissa, this isn't exactly what you do in your ministry, but we need help. Young couple, early 20s, newly married, no kids, no experience with kids, let alone an autistic child. literally had their niece dropped off the door. The dad said that he would be back in a week, and then he called them and said, I'm not coming back, keep her.
Oh, gosh.
And sorry, so every time I say it, it brings tears to my eyes because they called me and they needed help. And honestly, I didn't know what to do because we haven't faced that situation. So the first thing I did was call Promise. And I called them, what do I do? How can I help? What can we do from here? I called Promise, they connected me with DFACS. So I got to talk directly to a director at DFACS on the situation. They said, look, and then I called one of my foster moms. And we'll call her name Anna, who's an amazing woman. She's a teacher and she can have up to 7 kids. And she had 2 autistic children at the time. And I was telling her, and she said, Melissa, I'll take her. And my heart just dropped. And so I was talking to DFACS, talking to Promise, talking to the foster mom. Anyway, God orchestrated everything. At the end of the story, DFACS said we can't promise, if she goes in the system, we can't promise that she'll get placed there, but the family can request her, and so we'll do our best. But God was in the mix, and without Promise and their direction and their help and their support, none of this would have happened. And so in the story, she did get placed with with that foster mom. And that's all that aunt and uncle wanted. They called me because they wanted that child. They wanted to have access to her. They wanted to be in her life, but they knew they couldn't do it alone, and they needed help and they needed support. And so because of Promise, we had those connections, and she was able to get in a safe, loving Christian home. And today, I look at the 2 of them, the foster child and the parent and the foster mom, and they are an exact match. I mean, I really believe that, I know God placed her there and she's in the perfect place. She's where she's supposed to be, but that mom will probably end up adopting her, which I'm so excited about. That's one story. One quick one, another one. I have to tell this one because I thought about this afterwards and I have to share. So yes, we are doing amazing things with the kids, but we couldn't do that without foster moms like that foster mom. And so another story is this, the relationships that we are making with those moms so that, or their parents, the father, so they can foster stronger and longer is so important. One of our foster moms sadly passed during COVID, okay? The only person that I know personally that actually passed from COVID. But the relationship that I built with her and will always be in my heart, and so we'll call her name Jennifer, okay? Maybe I can't foster, but she did. And so I'm honoring her by continuing to work in this ministry to kind of do what she can no longer do. And 2 of her kids are in another foster home now. And so after she passed, we followed them and we provided a care community around those kids. And those kids are now being adopted by that foster family. And so that relationship, I will never forget. And when I bought the home that I'm in now, she bought me a plaque for my home, and it sits above my sink, and I see that every day, and I think of her. And so I do this also for her, in her honor. And so those are the relationships and the impacts that I get to see, and I get to be a part of.
What does the plaque say? What does your plaque say?
It's something about God and having prayer in the home, and that He's always with you. I can't say the exact words. So she just bought me something, but every time I see that, I do think of her. Yeah, but it is a biblical plaque, and it has something about God being with you in your home. So.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Thanks for sharing. Well, we've exposed a lot of who we are and how we do it, and I hope you haven't missed the heart. We started with the heart of the need and the children at different ages and what they signify as data points and as humans. And then we try to walk you through our model and how it works to plant FAMs, and then to give you a picture of what the grant would do, why we need an overhauled, updated system, why it needs to be more relational, why grants really, really matter, and why we want to use them to help trigger growth, particularly in the heart of Atlanta. And then, to hear from Melissa, like, what does it all mean? How does it really add up? What's a story of a family? Thank you for sharing those. So we are open book. There's no question you can't ask. Martha, do you want to come up now?
You can just open it to questions,
okay,
and
yes.
I'll close in prayer.
Okay, let's do that. So What do you want to know?
One thing I didn't understand, when you said you give this grant and then the family can take it and multiply it, I didn't understand that.
Yeah, so it's a matching grant. Yeah, so what we'll do is we give a family a link, and it's a profile page within the Promise system, and they can take the initial money that we give them, and then we'll ask them to match that through their community. So it's another way of engaging the local church. So, you know, if you received a grant, the other folks on the bench, and we'll commit Kathy, will give, you know, $100, $100, $100, and we're starting matching toward twice as big total at least. So it just takes our money that we can contribute and makes it a lot more.
And the community of the church matches it for that family. Okay, that makes sense, yeah.
It doesn't have to be within the church, it could be friends and neighbors also.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I have a question, more about the training or when you get a church involved, you have this fam team. I have a friend who fostered a child and ultimately adopted that child. It was a long process, and just in the fostering, I understand when she said it was 20 hours a week of just dealing with defects and different things, or if they wanted to go out of town for the weekend or have one night away, if you couldn't just get a babysitter.
Correct.
I mean, it's that person has to be approved, maybe done some training where you had to pull from an approved list of
approved respite care. Yeah.
So does the church or does Promise, in setting up this partnership, train people or give them the where to go to say, if we wanted, if our church was doing this, how would I get involved to know I can provide that care?
We do both. So the nation actually, but specifically the state of Georgia, changed some of those rules that would have impacted your friend, and it was partially at our bequest. We pushed and pushed and pushed that the standards would shift, so you can do respite care for up to 3 nights in a month without being formally trained as a foster parent now. So that was one thing that we really pushed long and hard for. It was our only time we got involved in legislation, and it almost killed us, but it worked. And so what we do is we craft 3 or 4 different roles on a team of people if we're sending a care community. One of those roles would be that overnight care. And that respite caregiver can, through our materials, get a level of training that's required. And all that's digital training, it's all something they can walk through and gain there. If they want to go beyond and go through the agency, whether it's Fulton County DFACS or Faith Bridge Foster Care, they can do additional levels of training if they want, and we point them in that direction. Yes?
Okay, I've got 2 things.
Yeah.
Number 1, I'm voting for you. And, I hope everybody else.
I like number 1.
Well, this has really touched my heart. I've never heard of you before, and I'm just amazed. Okay, now 2 things. I had a friend, I mean, we've known each other for years, but we've always not lived that close together. But anyway, this was probably 5 years ago. Anyway, Pam, we were talking one day, and she had become a child advocate for a 3-year-old.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's a whole other thing. So, you know, I was not in a position like to foster a child, but I said, you know, now that you are familiar with the system, what can I do as an individual? I never could talk to anybody else into helping me. I tell you what, I get a little annoyed. But one thing she said, and I had never thought of this, is when kids go into foster care, they are given like a black trash bag to put their few little things in or whatever. And she said one thing that really helps them feel important is that they would have their own little suitcase or a duffel bag. So I found out teenagers prefer a duffel bag. But little kids, I mean, I was able to find Minnie Mouse, you know, rolling suitcases, you know, for little bitty kids, which are my heart. But, and other little adorable suitcases. And you can get them at Marshall's for about $35. But my grandkids had them, so I know they hold up. But then I started shopping for teenagers, and it was just, I just feel like people here are going, oh, there's nothing I can do. I can't commit to all of this, but that's something you can do.
You can, absolutely. So two things. One is that I mentioned that we map out the churches, and different churches do different things. We call them activities. All of them we push to recruit foster or adoptive families. Most of them we recruit to use that need meeting system that I referenced. Lots of them we try to get to do care communities and wrap around. But we also have churches that the only thing they do is have a freezer. And they have freezer meals for foster families. We have other churches that all they do is have a duffel bag ministry. That's
really?
their thing. And so we partnered with Focus on the Family last year, and we got Focus on the Family to buy 2,500 duffel bags.
Wow,
And
I'm impressed.
They were flown here, and so that is a way for a church to be involved. And it, like you said, it is really significant. But the other thing I'll just respond to very briefly is that we white label Promise. So one thing that's misleading on the slide that showed the app, you actually won't see Promise686 on the app. You see your church's name. So we hear all the time, well, you guys are doing all this work, but we don't know about you. That's by design. We decided a long time ago that we wanted the church to be known and not Promise to be known. And as long as we can catalog impact, and we can go out and say, hey, listen guys, it's working, and raise the funds to do the work. So we do have a white labeled approach, which is a little bit different.
I was just gonna add that if you do have further questions, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up because of time. But if you do have further questions, I'm sure they're happy to answer at the end or once we're finished. But this reminded me, I guess, the question you had when you asked about the matching the grants, basically, it reminded me of a parable, and I was back there going, where's my Bible when I need it? But it reminded me of Matthew 25, and it says, I'm just gonna read a brief part. Again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants, that's us, and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. And he gave, 5 to 10. I was trying to reread it and remind myself. And one said, oh, I buried it and hid it. Here's what I have, what you gave me. The others invested it. This is the way that we invest. This is how we multiply what we have. Just speaking to OHS, specifically, our money goes a lot further. It's amazing what God has done to bring, all the partners together that are here, but this is how we multiply it, and this is how we grow it. And we say, here's $50,000 for your grant. Well, that's not just $50,000. That could turn into double, triple, quadruple. God's in control, and God owns it all. He can do anything. So it just reminded me of that, and how, we can be a small part of what y'all are doing. And it's the last time we came here, I got up here and I was speechless. I was like, I don't even know what to say. How do you make a difference when there's such a big problem? What is it, 400,000 somewhere?
600,000 come through in the course of a year, about on a given day, 400,000.
Wow. That are lonely and in need of a family. And I was looking at y'all's verse this morning in Psalms, and right before that it says, and I probably won't remember it exactly, but that God is the father of the fatherless. And that's our God. And the little bit that we can do is, help promote this app. It seems like maybe it's not a big deal, but that's huge. That's how they connect, and that's how, and it just reminds me of what, I can't remember her name, she just left.
Was it
The volunteer that has adopted.
Heather.
Heather, toothpaste. She just needed toothpaste, and obviously God knew and laid that on someone's heart, and they brought toothpaste, and you don't know, God nudges you to do something, and you go, do they really need this, or do I really need, do I have time to do this? And it made a world of difference for her. And so there are things we can do. So anyways, thank y'all, thank your team, your hospitality for having us, and for all the work that y'all are doing. It's amazing. So
Thanks for joining us. And we are available to answer more questions after we're done, but we really appreciate what you guys are doing and just your time investment too.
Okay, and let me just wrap us up in prayer. Oh, Father God, we just thank you so much for this day, for bringing us to Promise686. And as someone else has already said, before this, I didn't even know they existed. And I know that that's their way of almost like humbling themselves and saying, no, go to the churches. Find your resources through the church, through the ministry that has already been developed. And they are there to help sustain that and help to grow it and just multiply the resources. And I thank you, Lord, for what they're doing. I pray that you would just bless them abundantly. As I always pray the prayer of Jabez, Lord, over these ministries, God, I just pray that you would bless them indeed, Father. Expand their territory, who they're reaching, God. Expand their territory in the sense of finding more foster families, as they said Gwinnett County needed at least 100, and they were able to do it. Well, we need double that. We need more than that. So just expand their borders, God. Keep your hand upon them and keep them from harm. And Lord, I just pray that you would bless them above and beyond all that they could ever hope for, ask for, dream of, or imagine, Lord, that you would just continue to bless them abundantly, Lord, as only you can. And I just pray that you would help us to use our talents wisely and our treasures that you've blessed us with, God, that we would not just go dig and put them in the ground, but that we would invest them, Father, for your glory, for your kingdom. Thank you so much for this day. I pray that you would just bless us all and keep us safe as we go from here. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.